Hello, this is Clay from thejapanshop.com. I have a sentence breakdown today as well as a bit of beginner level grammar. So if you are a beginner of Japanese, if you're just starting out learning Japanese, then this video is for you. We're going to look at the troublesome pair of words, iru and aru. And in English we say there is, there are. In Japanese it's a little different, but there are two different words for it. There's aru and iru. Just to cut to the chase, aru is used when objects do not move of themselves, of their own will. And iru is used when, well, the opposite, objects, people, animals, things that move of its own accord. And first, let's hear the pronunciation for aru.
ある、
And then iru.
いる、
If you noticed, the only difference, well, of course, other than the sound a and i, the only difference is the pitch accent. Aru starts high and it goes down. One more time.
ある、
And iru starts low and it goes up slightly.
いる、
So those are just keep that in mind. Pitch accents are not incredibly important, but they do help makes your language more consistent and beautiful, I suppose, is a way to say it. And they both show existence, but as I mentioned just before, I already let the cat out of the bag, but they are not interchangeable. So we have an example here. Here's a picture of a spider and a cloud. So both spider and cloud are pronounced kumo. They're both exactly the same. In fact, even the pitch accent is high, low. It's the same. Kumo, kumo, which we'll listen to Yumi's recording in just a moment. But how can you tell the difference? Well, if you know the difference between these two sentences, kumo ga aru and kumo ga iru. Let's listen to Yumi say this instead of me.
雲がある、
And
雲がいる、
And just by saying the aru and iru, we can know what we're talking about. Are we talking about spiders or are we talking about clouds? And I think if you remember what I said previously, aru is used for things that do not move of their own accord, which a cloud does move, but it doesn't move on its own accord. And iru used with words with things that move on their own accord. So even though kumo can mean cloud or spider, and they're pronounced exactly the same, we know that kumo ga aru means that there is a cloud, and kumo ga iru means that there is a spider. Of course, if you have the kanji, if you know the kanji, it's pretty easy. And by the way, this lesson page is on thejapanesepage.com. It's totally free for everybody. You don't have to be a Makoto Plus member. I'll leave a link in the description below for you to go over there and listen to the sound files and go through this page just like I'm doing right now. But if you have the kanji and you can read it, so this is a fairly common kanji for cloud, and this isn't used as much. Sometimes that's written in kana. But if you have the kanji, it's very clear the meaning. But even without the kanji, because of the aru and iru, we know what we're talking about. So, the secret. Aru shows existence of non-moving objects, objects that cannot move on their own will, or on accord. But iru shows existence of things that move on their own. So, a cloud is pushed by wind, so it moves, but it doesn't move on its own accord. It uses aru. And a spider can move on its own, so it uses iru. There is a cloud, there is a spider. Now, the conjugations of these two words, aru and iru, are very tricky. Japanese verbs have three groups that are commonly put together in three groups. The irregular verbs, which are really just two, and then you have group one and group two. Well, iru and aru are in two different groups, so they're conjugated differently. So I would just recommend, if you're a beginner, I know I hated when I was in elementary school. I actually had Latin classes, and I hated learning conjugations. But these two words are actually very, very useful to learn as a whole. And I don't have on the webpage right now sound files, but I'll record Yumi saying these and put this up there later, probably today or tomorrow. Okay, so in conclusion, what does iru mean? When is it used for? It's used with people that are alive and moving, and animals that are alive and moving, and objects that move on their own. And this is kind of interesting. Like a moving vehicle can be iru as well as aru. It depends on the person. A moving Roomba vacuum, or we have a robot mower in our backyard, and it moves, and when it comes, it's iru to us. Aru is buildings, for example, things that don't move, non-living objects, plants and flowers. You say what they're alive. Well, again, remember, it's not about if they're alive or if they're dead. It's about can they freely move on their own and in any direction. You can say, well, flowers can move because they grow, right? But it's so slow. We don't really see that with our eyes, and they're not free to just get up and move across the state or something, or across the country. Meat and fish prepared for food, they can't move anymore, so they use aru. So here are a few fun situations. What about a car or taxi? Well, if it's parked, it's definitely going to be aru. But if it's moving, well, it could be iru. And again, some of these situations might be different for different people. But if it's moving and it has the potential to move in many different directions, then a lot of people will say iru. Well, what about a train? It moves like a car, but since it can't freely move in any direction, it has to stay on the tracks. It's aru. And a robot, well, I already mentioned our robot in the backyard, as well as a Roomba. It can move, and it can appear, like, for example, if you see it suddenly appear from the other room, the Roomba, then it could be iru. Or it could be aru, depends on the person. But because it moves on its own, iru is okay. Okay, what about a cow? Well, it's a living creature that can move, right? So it's going to be iru. But a slab of beef, aru. What about the moon? Well, it's usually aru, but it's possible it could be used. Some people might say iru, although Yumi said that she doesn't think that she would ever say that. So it's really up to the person. But because the moon does move, some people might say iru. Although I think because it's kind of like a train where it's on a track, it's probably most likely going to be aru. And what about a ghost? Well, in theory, it can move on its own, so it is iru. An alien, same thing. What about a dead body? Well, before death, it will be iru, but after death, it's aru. And lastly, the best one, what about a zombie? A zombie's dead, right? It's going to be iru because it moves on its own. So anyway, I hope this was helpful, and it's not that difficult on paper to remember these to differentiate between iru and aru, but it takes practice because we're not used to having this situation in English. So learn a few phrases like, for example, zombie ga, that would be iru, wouldn't it? So, learn a few fun phrases where you can say, okay, that's why it's iru and that's why it's aru. And words will become more familiar to you. So anyway, this has been Clay from thejapanshop.com. If you have any questions, please leave a message in the comments below. Thank you for watching.
チャンネル登録してね。